Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavis. Welcome to fantastic day 6 of our pre-Janmashtami celebrations. We are at T-3 sleeps from Janmashtami. This Janmashtami program is simply wonderful. Why, you ask? I'm paraphrasing His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj's answer. When we come in the presence of advanced devotees, we think, today is my happy day, because it blesses us to take shelter and guidance from them. In text 9, chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna sings, "One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my abode, O Arjuna." Prabhupada's expert daughter, Urmila Prabhu, facilitates our understanding and is doubling our enjoyment of Krishna's appearance. Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter in 1970, "A Brahmana's business is to preach the glories of the Lord, to learn the essence of Vedic knowledge, Krishna consciousness, and to teach others of the same knowledge." This statement by Srila Prabhupada is an apt summary of Urmila Prabhu's life of service. She and her husband are in the Vanaprastha order since 1996. They have 3 married children, 14 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons. She has a PhD in education, was a primary and secondary teacher for 27 years, and has 19 years of experience with school management. Urmila Prabhu is the chair of the Shastic Advisory Council to the GBC and an associate editor of Back to Godhead. She travels worldwide teaching Krishna consciousness. She is the author of Essence Seekers, Dr. Best Learn to Read, and the Great Mantra for Mystic Meditation. I have to mention her website's Ocean Deep Study Guides, which offer loving guidance on texts like the Nectar of Instruction. With Sati Sanga's Kamala Sita, she wrote Krishna Meditation. We will let you know when it is published and when it's ready to be purchased. Dear Vaishnavis, let us begin the feast that is Krishna's appearance, and let us give a warm Hare Krishna to Urmila Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So we're
Hare Krishna.
It's the 9th of August in 2020. This is from Sadhvi Sangha from South Africa. And we're going to be preparing our consciousness for Krishna's appearance, which is about to happen. So we have some special treats for everybody today. And there's much to watch, not just to hear. So we're coming to the time where Krishna appears in the world. So let's start out with understanding something about Krishna and something about the world. So there's an eternal spiritual world full of unlimited spiritual planets. On every planet, there's a different form of the Lord. And there's also a planet for Lord Ramachandra, and there's a planet called Goloka, the planet of the cows, where Krishna is there in Dwarka, Mathura, and Vrindavan in his ultimate youthful form, Kishore, Krishna, sporting as a young prince. In the spiritual world, there's many different rasas or relationships that the living entities, the jivas such as ourselves, can have with the Lord. But some living entities, Bahirmukhe, they turn their face on Krishna and they prefer to come into this dark material atmosphere. In order to facilitate their material desires, the Lord expends himself as Mahavishnu, the great, humongous form of the Lord, who from his breathing and his glance create time that awakens the material energy and creates space, air or gaseous substances, fire or radiant energy, water or liquid energy, and earth or solid matter. He then expands from his breathing all of the universes that each appear like bubbles. In each universe, he again expands as Ksirodakashayi Vishnu. From Ksirodakashayi Vishnu in each universe, lying in the great Garbha ocean, a lotus flower comes out of his navel, and in the lotus flower is a four-headed being, the engineer of the universe, called Brahma. And as we see here in this beautiful painting, the Lord is lying on the bed of Seshanak, an expansion of Balara. Lord Brahma enters into meditation and finds in the stem of the lotus the seeds of all of the planets and all living beings, which he then manifests and engineers according to the direction of the Lord. This is the cover of the first canto of the Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada had a similar cover done in India. And here you see the expansive Vaikuntha planets with Goloka Vrindavan and the dark cloud of the material world. And in one of these universes, a very small universe, out of the millions and millions of universes, there's a very small planet on which we live, called the Earth. About 5,000 years ago, the people who were the rulers of the Earth, the political leaders, who were supposed to lead the Earth to peace, prosperity, and spiritual realization, were instead demoniac. Now, this shouldn't surprise us. In fact, we have very similar situation today, that many of the world leaders, not all of them, of course, but many of the world political leaders are supposed to be taking care of the citizens, and instead they are simply interested in their own fame, their own wealth, and so forth, and they're willing to harass the citizens, to steal from the citizens for themselves. So this kind of situation is of great concern to the Earth itself. The Earth is a living being called Bhumi. She's actually the wife of the Lord. And this planet is hers. She's the presiding deity of the planet. Everything is alive. The whole universal body is the body of the Lord and is alive. Everything, Sarva Kalamidam Brahma, everything is ultimately spiritual. So Bhumi Devi is very upset when the people who are supposed to be taking care of things are instead making a mess of things. I mean, we feel like that, right? When someone who's supposed to be taking care of things is instead making a big mess. When we see that people who are in charge are, putting money in their own pockets and yelling at everybody and harassing everybody. And in this case, she felt that she couldn't do anything about it, that it was beyond her capacity. So she decided that she was going to go to her superior authority. So she took the form of a cow. And in this cow form, she approached Lord Brahma. He's in charge of the universe. So if there's any big problem, it has to go to him. So she goes to Lord Brahma and says, I've got a problem with demons running the world, those who are supposed to be taking care of things. So when we have problems in our life, in our service, she has this service to take care of the planet. Some things we can deal with ourselves. There's some things that maybe we can deal with, directly. And other things we go to our authorities. Now, in this case, Lord Brahma was thinking, is there something that he can do about this? And he thought, I don't think I can do something about this. I think I need to go to my authority. Because, as Krishna says,
यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
So now we're going to recite this verse together. Of course, please keep yourself muted. So just recite it, and we're going to have a lead in response, so we can all sing along with the response. Oops, sorry. That didn't work. We will do that again.
Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham.
So Lord Brahma, remembering that whenever there's a disturbance in religious principles, whenever so-called religious principles become irreligious principles, that the Lord is going to appear. So remembering this, he brought along the demigods, and he went to the planet in this universe, the Vaikuntha planet in this universe, to Swetadweep, to see the Lord and ask him to help. So whenever we approach the Lord for help, first there's glorification of the Lord, however brief. I mean, even when Uttara was being attacked by the Brahmastra weapon, still you notice she does a little quick glorification. So here the demigods do an in-depth glorification. They chant what's called the Purusha Shukta.
Om Sahasrajirgha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapad Sabhovim Vishwato Vrittva Atyadishtadashangulam.
The Supreme Lord, in the form of the universe, has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 feet, where he contains all the living entities, having pervaded the universe completely to give it existence. Being independent, he expanded himself beyond it by 10 fingers.
Purusha Vedagam Sarvam Yadbhutai Yachabhavyam Utamritatvasya Shanaha Yadannena Tirohadi.
Universes, past, present, and future, are but manifestations of the Supreme Lord, who expands himself as the Purusha. He is the Lord of immortality, but has manifest himself as the Purusha in the universe so that the jivas may enjoy material fruits.
Yetavanasya mahima adhodyayadischa purushaha padosya vishwabhutani tripadasya mritam divi.
The past, present, and future universes are manifestations of the Lord's powers, but the Lord himself is much greater. The material creation is but 1/4 portion, and the eternal nature in the spiritual sky exists in 3/4 portion. Now those are portions of energies. They're not portions of geography. It's not that the material world is 1/4 geographically of the creation. The material energy is 1/4 of the Lord's potencies.
Tripadurvagudait purushaha सेहा भवात् पुनः ततो विश्वं व्यक्रामते शासनानशने अभि.
The 3/4 portion of the Lord transcended the material portion. The Lord in the 1/4 portion manifested the universe again as he had done repeatedly before. The Lord of the 1/4 portion began the work of creation by going all around, taking the form of all animate and inanimate objects. So the Lord, of course, incarnates in all species of life. Here we're talking about the Vivinamsa expansions, ourselves, that the Lord expands as the jiva. That doesn't mean that we're God, but we are little parts of God. And as far as matter is also part of the energy of the Lord, and therefore it is an expansion of his potency.
तस्माद् विराड जायत विराजो अधिपूरुषः स जातो अत्यरिच्यत पश्चात् भूमिमथो पुरः.
From that Lord, the Virat or universe was born, and in that the Virata Purusha, Paramatma of the universe was born. Having appeared, the Virata Purusha grew and produced the earth and the bodies of the jivas.
ब्राह्मणोऽस्य मुखमासीत् बाहुराजन्यः कृतः ऊरू तदस्य यद्वैश्यः पद्यागं शूद्रो अजायत.
From the face came the Brahmanas, from the 2 arms the Kshatriyas came into being, from the thighs of the Virat Purusha came the Vaishyas, and from his feet the Shudras were born.
चन्द्रमा मनसो जातः चक्षो सूर्यो अजायत मुखादिन्द्रश्चाग्निश्च प्राणाद्वायुरजायत.
The moon was born from his mind, the sun was born from his 2 eyes, from his mouth were born Indra and Agni, and from his breath Vayu was born. So these are just some of the Purusha Shukta prayers that the demigods recited to the Lord, and they waited for an answer. Now, sometimes when we pray, we also wait for a long time. We may pray to the Lord, I want this, I need help with this, what about this, what about that? And sometimes we get silence. So although they're demigods, they're in the mode of goodness generally, they're the trusted servants of the Lord, they're right outside his entranceway in Swetatweep. He doesn't come to see them, he doesn't talk to them. But Lord Brahma gets a message from within his heart.
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि जुगे जुगे.
Krishna is saying to deliver the pious, to annihilate the miscreants. I myself will appear millennium after millennium. And we can chant this again together.
Paritrānāya sadhūnām vināṣāya ca duskritam dharma samsthapanarthāya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritrānāya sadhūnām vināṣāya ca duskritam dharma samsthapanarthāya sambhavami yuge yuge.
So the Lord told the demigods that they should also come to the world. He wanted them to come, many of them to come as his elders, to prepare the way for his appearance. And so the demigods came, or they expanded themselves. And some very important persons that come when the Lord wants to appear in a human-like form. Of course, he needs a mother and father. And so his great devotees, Vasudeva and Devaki, and they got married. Now, I want us to think a little bit that not only did the Lord respond just within the heart of Lord Brahma, he didn't just immediately say, okay, I'm going to go to earth and kill Hamsa, I'm going to kill the rascals. He said, go prepare things for me. So, Vasudeva has to appear, he has to grow up, he has to get old enough to get married. So how old must he be here? 20, 25, something like that, let's just say. So at least 21, 23 years have gone by between the time that the demigods asked for a solution and Vasudeva and Devaki get married. So, quite a bit of time has gone by. Now, at Vasudeva and Devaki's marriage, her cousin brother Kamsa is going to be taking her to Vasudeva's house. Kamsa and Vasudeva were friends. And it was very common when the young girl, in those days, people were quite young when they married, when the young girl was going to her husband's house, that some relative would take her there and make sure that she was settled and happy so that she would feel peaceful. So Kamsa took that role of taking Devaki. Let's travel with the wedding procession. There was a voice in the sky. Kamsa, you're a fool. You're driving this chariot of your sister and brother-in-law on their wedding day. But don't you know her 8th child will kill you? Now, most of us are interested in self-preservation. And in this case, Kamsa was very interested in self-preservation. And so he immediately took out his sword, grabbed Devaki by the hair, and was about to kill her. This is the nature of materialistic people. 1 minute they're loving, and the next minute they're not loving. Now, this is a little extreme, that the next minute he was going to murder her. Most people aren't quite that extreme. But the idea that someone is your friend and, in an instant, they can become your enemy. And I'm sure we've seen this even within ourselves, that we feel very affectionate and kind and loving towards someone, and they say something or they do something, instantly we're furious with them. That same person, just like in 1 second, we just become angry and we say or do something in anger because somehow we feel threatened by them. So Kamsa thought, well, if her 8th child's going to kill me, let me kill her now. So Vasudeva is trying to reason with Kamsa. After all, Devaki is his bride. And he's thinking, it's my duty as her husband to have to protect her. So he speaks wonderful philosophy to Kamsa. We don't have time to go into it in depth today, but it's a very enlightening section. You can read in the Bhagavatam or in Krishna book, how Vasudeva is talking to Kamsa about how we're not this body, how we change in one body to another, in one life after another. And therefore, we shouldn't be so anxious and so angry about protecting ourselves. And Vasudeva was being very tolerant here. I wanted to read a little thing that Srila Prabhupada writes here in Krishna book. A saintly person can tolerate all kinds of miserable conditions of life. A learned man can discharge his duties without awaiting favorable circumstances. A heinous person like Kamsa can act in any sinful way, and a devotee can sacrifice everything to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So none of Vasudeva's philosophy was having any effect on Kamsa. And I'm sure that we experience this, that sometimes when a person is very angry, very upset, that philosophy isn't effective. Philosophy, logic, the person's emotions are so great, we could say on a biological level, the stress hormones and stuff are, in fact, biologically, If we feel threatened, our body is flooded with stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And part of the action of anger is that our higher thinking skills are lost. Anger is meant to protect us in time of threat. And so the energy goes to our arms and legs and our heart and our lungs. Our digestion stops, our immune system stops, and our higher order thinking skills also stop. And so therefore, when a person is very angry, or very, very upset, overwhelmed by grief or something, trying to reason with them is not usually effective. So Vasudeva, although he spoke wonderful philosophy, Kamsa didn't desist. Of course, he was kind of, in one sense, he was affected because he didn't just immediately kill Deva. He was listening to Vasudeva, but it wasn't affecting him. He wasn't changing his mind. So then Vasudeva says, look, the problem is not with Devaki. The problem is with her children, and not even all her children, the 8th child. So every time we have a child, I'll bring you the child, and you can decide what to do with him. So the way Vasudeva was thinking was, I have to immediately take care of Deva. That's my immediate need. There's no children yet. Maybe there won't even be any children. And in any case, if the 8th child is destined to kill Kamsa, then that's going to happen. And it doesn't really matter what I do. So he feels that this was an emergency situation. And it was interesting that Kamsa had the mood. He thought, Vasudeva is a good man. I can trust him. And we find that saintly persons often have this reputation, Dira Janapriyo, that like the Goswamis were dear to both the saintly and the ruffians. And that's not always true. Hiranyakashipu didn't like Prahlad, for example. But so just being a saintly person doesn't mean everybody will trust you or everybody will like you. That's not correct. But many, many times, a person who's saintly is respected even by those who are demoniac. That's the case with Narada also. So Kamsa says, okay, fine, I trust you. And actually what's interesting is that Vasudeva really wasn't trustworthy in this regard. He did not bring Kamsa, his child Krishna. And as Srila Prabhupada talks about the difference between Vasudeva and Dasarath, that Dasarath kept his promise even when Ramachandra was apparently harmed by that promise, whereas Vasudeva, in order to save Krishna, broke his promise to Kamsa and cheated Kamsa of the child Krishna. So anyway, when the first child was born, the first son was born, Vasudeva brought him to Kamsa. And Kamsa was very impressed with this. Again, even demons can be impressed by the good behavior of devotees and saintly persons. And he said, the prophecy was about the 8th child. I have no threat from your first child, and so I don't need to take him. And Kamsa was really impressed that Vasudeva was willing to bring his newborn child and to trust whatever Kamsa would do. Then Narada Muni gets involved, and Narada Muni is a very interesting personality in the stories and the Bhagavatam and the other Puranas. So Narada Muni is a pure devotee of the Lord, and he travels all over all the material universes and the spiritual world. He's a traveling spaceman, and he's a musician. So we have, of course, in this world, people who are traveling musicians, right? People who go from one gig to another, and they have that free life as a traveling musician. So there's a transcendental reality of a traveling musician, and that's Narada Muni. He travels everywhere. So as I say, he goes in the material world and the spiritual world. I mean, he also has other expansions, like Srivas Thakur is his expansion, which is interesting because Narada Muni is a brahmachari and Srivas is married. But anyway, Narada Muni is one of those saintly persons. He's called Devarshi. He's the rishi among the demigods, who is also liked and trusted by the demons. He's considered neutral. So although he's called Devarshi, although he's called the rishi of the devas, of the demigods, he's considered a neutral, detached person. And so he's trusted by both the demons and the demigods. He's trusted as a truth speaker. Now, although Narada Muni is a truth speaker, he has some agenda behind what he says. So here he's coming to Kamsa and he says, my dear Kamsa, I would like you to know that the 8th child of Vasudeva is Vishnu, is going to be Vishnu. And although the first 7 children will not be Vishnu, they will be Vishnu's associates, because Lord Vishnu has asked his associates to appear before him. You know, he's almost taking the role of the spy. It's like, you know, he heard what Lord Vishnu, or he heard about what Lord Vishnu told Lord Brahma, and what Lord Vishnu through Lord Brahma ordered the demigods, and now he's letting the other side know. You know, he's acting like he's Kamsa's spy and letting him know what the demigods have in mind. So why does Narada Muni do this? And we find that the Lord, you know, he also loves the jivas who are demons. He loves all living entities. And the jivas who are demons, they achieve their position through their good karma, through following the laws of the universe. It's not that they can just, you know, take over a kingdom by brute force. If somebody has some position and some opulence and some power, they've earned that by their karma. And so the Lord is not very inclined to take away a rightfully earned kingdom, even if it's being misused. It's like, okay, well, you earned it. You know, it's like if you work for a house and buy a house, even if you're not taking good care of it, the government doesn't just jump in and take it away from you. So the Lord is, and also, you know, he loves all living entities. So he's not really that inclined. And it has to be something really extreme for the Lord to step in. Now, he did already tell the demigods that he would take care of the situation. But it's still Narada Muni's thinking, you know, if the Lord is going to get involved, then he's got to see how bad Kamsa is. You know, it can't just be some little thing where Kamsa is very selfish. You know, I mean, just like if we have a political leader in the world who's selfish and egotistical. I mean, Kamsa in this place, he usurped the kingdom from his father, Ugrasena, so that was pretty nasty. But it's also pretty common among royalty on this planet. So that alone wouldn't be enough. So Narada Muni wanted to increase Kamsa's atrocities, to give the Lord impetus to get involved. And basically he wanted Kamsa to show his true colors. A similar thing happens in the Mahabharata, where Yudhisthira becomes bewildered and gambles, and ends up gambling away his brothers and even his wife. By that happening, the crews show their true colors. They're put in a situation where they show how low they will go and how degraded and how mean they are, so that it's almost impossible for anyone to have any sympathy for them. Now, Narada Muni also incites Kamsa's personal feelings by telling him that in his previous life, he was a demon named Kalanimi, and that's Kalanimi on the lion, fighting at the battle of the demigods and the demons on the shore of the ocean of milk. And this was a battle that went on after it was revealed that Mohini Murti was actually Vishnu. So the demigods and the demons had fought over who was going to get the nectar. First, they churned the ocean together, the ocean of milk together. And then Dhanvantari came out with the nectar and the demons snatched it. And then Mohini Murti, who was the Lord, came and bewildered the demons, gave all the nectar to the demigods. And then she revealed that she was Vishnu. Then the demons got very angry that they were cheated. And so there was a huge battle on the shore of the ocean of milk. And Lord Vishnu came in his form as Vishnu, and he killed this demon Kalanimi. So Narada Muni tells him, you were Kalanimi in your last life. Lord Vishnu killed you in that life, and he's going to come again this life and kill you. So Kamsa is now really riled up here, that Lord Vishnu's associates are coming and that he's already my enemy, that Vishnu's already my enemy. He's already hurt me, and he's going to do it again. So at this point, Kamsa has Vasudeva and Devaki put in jail. So Vasudeva, of course, has other wives as well, has another, I think, 15 other wives. and they were left there in Mathura, or some of them, of course, went into hiding. Like we know, Rohini and many of the other wives, we don't know how many went to Vrindavan, although they could still go and see Vasudeva. Now, although he was put in prison, he wasn't put in ordinary prison. So in those days, political prisoners were often just simply restrained in some area of the palace, like that. But still, he put them in prison, and the child that was already born, he killed that child. Now, if you had been put into prison and your cousin brother had killed your child, and you knew that he was going to kill then all of your subsequent children, you probably wouldn't produce any more children. You'd say, well, I'm not going to produce children just so they'll be killed. But Vasudeva and Devaki, of course, they have some inner knowledge that they are meant to be the parents of the Lord, that they come to the earth for that purpose. And also they've heard this prophecy that their 8th child will be Krishna. So, sometimes we think about how much trouble and sacrifice we may have to take to do our service. But for Vasudeva and Devaki, in order to do their service of becoming the parents of the Lord, they had to wait for the 8th child, and it may not be known to them why they couldn't just have their first child be Krishna. Why did it have to be the 8th child? And they knew very well that they were risking these other children being killed by Kamsa, which is exactly what happened. Now, what's quite interesting is who the first 6 children were. So we mentioned that Kamsa was Kalanimi in his previous life. Kalanimi's father was Hiranyakashipu. So Kalanimi was the brother of Prahlad Maharaj. So Kalanimi had 6 sons. And these 6 sons decided that, like their grandfather, Hiranyakashipu, they were going to perform austerity and please Lord Brahma. And they were also going to get benedictions. As well, granddaddy did it, let's do it too. But they didn't ask Hiranyakashipu. They didn't say, my dear Hiranyakashipu, we would like to perform austerities just like you did, and may we have your permission? So in Vedic society, you ask permission of your superior, you ask permission of your husband or your parents, or in this case, your grandparents, before you would do something. They didn't ask permission. And so Hiranyakashipu cursed them. He said, I curse you that you will be killed by your own father. Now that did not happen in that life. It happened in the next life. And so Kamsa was killing jivas who had previously been his own children. And this is the way of materialistic life. Just like King Chitraketu, he had this child who died at a very young age. And he said, you must have been my enemy in a previous life, and you've come and then died at a young age to give me unbearable grief. And Srila Prabhupada writes in a purport that that's what happened. That child had been an enemy in a previous life. So, this was also you could say it was almost a curse on Kalanimi as well, that he was put in a situation where he was killing these babies who had been his own children. Now, it goes back even further, because these personalities represent envy, madness, which includes fear, lust, anger, greed, and illusion. And these 6 sons were, before they were the children of Kalanimi, they were associated with Lord Brahma. When Lord Brahma had some attraction to his daughter Vak, which means speech, they were disdainful. Oh, look at Brahma. Look at him running after his daughter, being overwhelmed by lust. They had some arrogance and some self-righteousness. A little bit of a lesson here for us about being critical and self-righteous. Anyway, they took birth as demons, as the sons of Kalanimi, and then they took birth as the sons of Devaki. So they got purified by being in Devaki's womb. She is a great devotee, Devakyam Deva Rupina, as she actually has the same form and potency, practically speaking, as God. Also, they became liberated later when Devaki asked Krishna to return her dead children to her, they came in the form of babies and drank her breast milk that Krishna had drunk. And then they became liberated and went back to Lord Brahma. So it all ends happily. So anyway, they are also symbolic of the death of Devaki's own lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, and madness. And this was destroyed in her by Devaki's fear of Maya, which is represented by Kamsa. So Devaki's fear of material association, represented by Kamsa, allowed Kamsa's children, they were actually in one sense Kamsa's children, these 6 enemies to be destroyed. And interestingly enough, they were destroyed by Kamsa. Then the 7th child is Lord Balaram, Seshanag, the Supreme Lord himself, enters Devaki's womb. And at the same time, one of Vasudev's other wives, Rohini, was also pregnant. So, as I said, Vasudeva and Devaki weren't just in ordinary jail. It's just that they were confined, and Vasudeva was allowed to see his other wives, although only he and Devaki was imprisoned. And it could be that some of his other wives also had children at that time that we just did not mention in the Bhagavatam. But anyway, Rohini was pregnant. And then Yogamaya, on the order of Krishna, Rohini had a miscarriage, and her miscarried child was replaced by Balaram, who was transferred from Devaki's womb, which made it appear that Devaki had had a miscarriage. So Balaram was then born as the son of Rohini in Vrindavan. And if we really think about Rohini's situation, she knew that her husband was imprisoned by Kamsa. Later on in the story, of course, Kamsa sends Putana to kill children. And so she was worried that maybe her child would also be killed by Kamsa. And therefore, she didn't go see Vasudeva after the child was born. And, Balaram was raised without his father, and Rohini raised him without seeing her husband for a very long time, until Balaram was 16 and went to Mathura. So we can imagine she has her friend Yasoda there, and she's under the protection of Vasudev's half-brother Nanda Maharaj. But still, you're raising a child, those of us who are mothers, of course, the main person you want to share your child's upbringing with is your husband. And she takes this austerity for the safety of Balaram. So we're seeing a lot of personalities here taking on a lot of austerity for the sake of service. So anyway, it's understood that Devaki's 7th pregnancy is a miscarriage, but that's still counted as a child. And so Kamsa is expecting now, the next one is the 8th. So meanwhile, Yogamaya enters the womb of Yasoda in Gokula, again under the order of the Lord. Then Krishna enters Vasudev's mind. Vasudeva is also a name meaning pure goodness. So he enters Vasudev's mind, and from there he enters the mind of Devaki, and then the womb of Devaki. And Srila Prabhupada says that this was an initiation, that Devaki was initiated by Vasudeva. So this is not just some, ordinary pregnancy with seminal discharge. It was a divine pregnancy where the Vasudeva consciousness of the Lord was transferred to his wife, who was also his disciple. And in this way, the Lord enters her body. So, in one sense, the Lord is in all of our bodies. He's in our heart. But to have the Lord personally living within one's body is very extraordinary. And those of us who were mothers, and we can think about the joy that we might have had being pregnant and feeling that closeness to a child. And if that child was the Lord, how much ecstatic joy was there. But of course, Devaki was also feeling very fearful because she was afraid that Kamsa would kill her child. And so she's, there, she's in prison, she's restrained, he's killed all the other children that were born alive. And she knows he's going to be especially wanting to kill this child. So she has a lot of fear, not material fear, but she's afraid for the safety of her child. And in that state, the demigods come and comfort her. And it says the demigods were praying to her. They were praying to her, Devakyam Deva Rupina, that you, Deva Rupina, you are the form of God. You are as good as God. You are of the same quality as God. And we are praying to you as the Mother of God. We see this praying to the Mother of God is very prominent in Roman Catholicism. This concept of praying to Mother Mary as the Mother of God. So the demigods have many wonderful prayers. We're going to focus on one of them. So one verse where the demigods talk about, or maybe it's two verses, how this miseries of this world, our material attachments, our suffering, are as big as an ocean. Those of us who've seen an ocean, even if it's like just the Indian Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, or the Atlantic, what to speak of the Pacific, and how vast the ocean is, and our material attachments, our anartas, our offenses. I don't know about all of you, but for myself, if I look honestly at how selfish I am and how offensive I am, it feels like an ocean. It feels like something completely overwhelming. Now, when you're new to Krishna consciousness, it's not like that. When you newly take up Krishna consciousness, you think, yes, I'm a very spiritual person. And those of you who are new, I will warn you that at a certain point you start to see why you have a material body. So it seems like it's this great ocean, and the demigods say that saintly persons cross this ocean in a boat. This is an illustration of one of our children's books, by the way. That saintly persons cross the ocean in a boat to attain to Krishna. So now you might say, well, if saintly persons get in this boat and they cross the ocean, then how am I going to get across? Because once the boat goes across the ocean, there's no more boat. It's on the other side. You know, how is it that there's still a boat on this side? You know, here I am on this side. I can see Krishna. You can all see Krishna on the other side of the ocean. See him there? It's kind of hidden a little bit. And how am I going to get over there? Right? The saintly persons have taken the boat. How is it still on this side? So the boat is a metaphor. The boat is a metaphor for Krishna's lotus feet. And the demigods say something here that I have found to be of great solace. They say something here that's really amazing, because we look at this big ocean where, you know, even after so many years of chanting Hare Krishna, I see that there's so many attachments and so much selfishness and so many offenses. You know, if I can go for a whole day without offending anybody, it's like some kind of a miracle. It's like, wow, I made it to the end of the day without offending anybody. How did I do that? You know, and it's practically every moment I'm committing some offense against the Lord. And the demigods say you don't actually have to get into the boat. They say you only have to approach the boat. And this is very interesting. They say that's why the boat's still there, because you don't have to get into it. You only have to get close to it. This prayer of the demigods reminds us of how Srila Prabhupada says, if you take one step towards Krishna, he takes 10 steps towards you. Now, what happens when you enter the boat is a miracle, and I think we've all experienced this. That you start walking toward this boat, you just make an effort, you reach out just a little bit for Krishna, you just somewhat reach out for Krishna. And then something miraculous happens to that ocean. It becomes a little puddle. The demigods say it's as big as the puddle in the hoof print of a cow, which I couldn't find any pictures of that, so I use this one from the city street. But this little puddle is such that you could step over it without even noticing that there was a puddle. So as soon as we approach Krishna, and again, we all experience this, I'm going through this and that and the other thing, there's so many problems, and when I just start thinking about Krishna, how beautiful Krishna is, how kind Krishna is, Krishna's activities, then all my troubles go, they just become this little puddle. So the demigods are offering their prayers, and the time of Devaki's pregnancy is coming to an end. There was peace and prosperity everywhere, and within the minds of everyone, there were signs of good fortune. The rivers were full. The lakes were decorated with lotus flowers. birds were singing with sweet voices. The wind carried the aroma of different flowers. The sensation of bodily touch was very pleasing. The Brahmanas' minds became full of joy because they could hear transcendental vibrations in the sky proclaiming the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Sarvesham Swastirbhavatu Sarvesham Shantirbhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu.
And then, in the dense darkness of night, like the full moon rising on the eastern horizon, Krishna appeared with 4 arms fully decorated within Kamsa's prison. But this was a very poignant, bittersweet appearance of the Lord. Because Devaki and Vasudeva offered their prayers to the Lord, and Devaki ends her prayers with saying, "Oh, I'm great, now you're here, now you're going to kill Kamsa." No, she didn't say that. She said, "Now that you're here, I'm afraid Kamsa will kill you." So this is, although Devaki has some knowledge of the omnipotence of God, she feels as a mother. We can understand that in this world, right? Those of us who are adults, our mothers still worry about us, right? I remember talking to my brother-in-law once. He met me at the temple and he was saying how he was in town to visit his mother, and his mother said, "Don't come home too late." And he said, "I was saying to my mother, you know, I'm already 55 years old." So this feeling is there with the Mother of God too. She sees him in this 4-armed form with all the weapons of Vishnu. This is going. So Sukadeva Goswami explains that Vasudeva and Devaki in their previous lifetimes had done thousands of years of austerities to be the parents of God. They tolerated being put into prison, having 6 children be murdered in front of their eyes, to finally see the Lord. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanamam prapajjate. Maybe many of us have been practicing bhakti for many, many, many years and many austerities. And imagine, we finally see the Lord. He finally comes, and he comes in the mood and rasa that is dear to our heart. And then what does the Lord say to them? They say, "What are we going to do to protect you?" And he said, "Take me away. Take me across the river. Give me away." How would you feel if their Krishna came? "Here I am. Now give me away." So the doors open, the guards go to sleep, their chains fall off. Devaki has to give her child to her husband, who's going to take him across the Yamuna on a stormy night. Sesha will protect him from the wind and the rain. And how is Devaki feeling left in the prison? Our husband leaves with her child. And how does Vasudeva feel? He gets to the home of his friend Nanda, who's his half-brother. And then he has to put Krishna down and walk away. And he takes on the order of the Lord the daughter born to Yasoda. And this is also very extraordinary. He knew that this girl would be in danger because he knew Kamsa had killed all of his sons, that the girl was in danger also of being killed. He was hoping that because she was a girl, Kamsa wouldn't kill her. She would be all right. Maybe they'd be able to raise Nanda's daughter as their own. But still, he was risking his friend's child for the sake of Krishna. So he took the baby girl back across the Yamuna, went back into the cell. They put on the chains, the doors locked, and the baby began to cry. Kamsa had been waiting for this. He knew Devaki's time was near. And so as soon as the guards told him a baby was crying, he immediately came to the cell. And Devaki says, "It's a girl. You're not to be killed by any girl. When she grows up, she can marry one of your sons." He didn't care. He took her and he was about to smash her against the wall. And then she appears as Durga. "You fool," she says. I'm called a fool twice. I'm sure he doesn't take very kindly to this. Wasn't the kind of person who'd like to be called a fool. It's the child who will kill you has already been born somewhere else. So Kamsa believed her. He said, "It seems even the demigods from the sky speak lies." And he apologized to Vasudeva and Devaki. The apologies of demons don't mean very much. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a nasty person who apologizes, but the apology doesn't mean anything. So it was like that. Anyway, he let them go. He let them go out of prison. He imprisoned them years later when Krishna came back to Mathura, but he let them out of prison. It's interesting, though, that even though he let them out of prison, they stayed in Mathura. They didn't want to go to Vrindavan and alert Kamsa to the fact that they had children in Vrindavan. As I said, Vasudeva's wives didn't then visit. We don't have any record like of Balaram and Rohini coming to visit Vasudeva or anything like that. So they stayed in separate situations to protect the children. This is bhakti, and I'm willing to sacrifice my own ecstasy. Of course, they had an ecstasy of separation. That must have been very intense. Meanwhile, there was a great celebration across the river in Gokula. There, Krishna was raised as the child of Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj, and there was a great celebration. So our story of Krishna's appearance ends here, but we're going to do a little brief meditation on Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. He was enchanting the residents of Vrindavan by his childhood activities. Like here we see him catching the tail of a calf and being dragged through the mud. And he grows up from babyhood to his eternal Kishora age, interacting with so many of his different associates in different moods.
Hey Govinda, hey Gopala,
Hey Govinda,
hey Gopala,
Hey Govinda,
hey Gopala,
Hey Govinda,
hey Gopala,
Hey Govinda.
hey Gopala.
So as we started off this meditation,
Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham.
So Krishna came to establish real dharma of bhakti in Vrindavan. And of course, eventually he killed Kamsa, many, many years between the time, if we take, let's say Vasudeva was 25 when he married Devaki and 8 children, that would be 33. And then Krishna waited till he was 16. So that would be 49 years between the time the demigods prayed to Krishna. Don't expect that Krishna always fulfills things instantly. But he did eventually kill Kamsa and all the other demons, and he gave protection to the devotees.
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे.
And of course, all of us all over the world, from whatever cultures or nationalities or backgrounds or anything, we've all gotten to fall in love with Krishna by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. I want to end with a little meditation, something that we've just put together for this Janmashtami. So I'm going to just give me a second here to get this together.
Mumacho munayo deva sumanam si mudanvitah mandam mandam juladara Jaghajur anusakaram Nishite tama udbhute Jayamane janadhane Devakyam Devarupinyam Vishnuhu Sarva Guhashayah. ज्ञानसागरं निश्चिते ताम उद्भूते जायमने जनार्दने देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु सर्वगुहाशय निश्चिते ताम उद्भूते जायमने जनार्दने देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु सर्वगुहाशय अविरशिद्यत प्रचायं तिस्सिन्दूरेव पुष्कलः देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु सर्वगुहाशय देवाख्यं देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु सर्वगुहाशय देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु सर्वगुहाशय देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु देवाख्यं देवाख्यं देवरूपिण्यं विष्णु
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And I guess we have a little bit of time for questions and discussion. We can put things in the, okay, so we have why kill all the other children when the eighth was the one to kill Kamsa? That's already been answered. That Narada Muni convinced him that those were the associates of the Lord and the helpers of the Lord. And so he wanted to kill the helpers as well. So any more questions you can put in the chat window, or you can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, dear Urmila Prabhu. Thank you so much for such a wonderful, well, I don't want to say class because it didn't feel like a class. It felt, well, I think I'd rather read the comments from Facebook because they have, the Vaishnavis have better words than me at the moment. Thank you so much, Mother Urmila, for the gift of this unique hearing experience. Indeed, you are Prabhupada's expert daughter, who is our loving aunt. We are thankful for our good fortune. This was like going to a transcendental theatre afternoon.
That was kind of the idea.
Okay, we have a couple more questions as well. The first question is, Kamsa always thought about Krishna, saw Krishna and interacted with Narada Muni, Vasudeva and Devaki. Why then did Kamsa and the demons not give up their hatred towards Krishna?
Oh, excellent question. So Srila Prabhupada says that if we associate with devotees, eventually we will get purified. But if that association is demoniac and we are offensive, then first we will have to suffer for our offenses and then become purified. Nice to see you, Estasaki.
This question comes from one of the Vaishnavis on Facebook. The question is, Krishna is omniscient and Trikala Gyan. Therefore, why did Narada Muni need to show how bad Kamsa is? Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Why did Kamsa need? Not for Krishna's sake, for the world. Because, you know, we want bad guys to be killed, but we want to see that they're actually bad guys. It was one friend of mine who's not a practicing devotee, and who mentioned to me, you know, in the movies, whenever they want to show that someone's really a bad guy, they have the bad guy kill someone who's loyal to them for some small offense. And that immediately signals to everybody that it's a bad guy. And so then when the bad guy gets killed, nobody's sorry. So you don't want people blaming Krishna. And of course you could say Krishna arranged, but anyway, the Kamsa was a relative. He was an uncle. And normally you don't kill a superior family member. But in general, I mean, for God just to go around killing people, you know, people would criticize. So he wants people to understand how bad these people actually are. And to do that, I mean, with all of us, right? We can all make a show of being nice people until we're instigated by something. And then once we're instigated by something, then we show our real behavior. So Narada Muni wanted Kamsa to be instigated so that he could show to people what he was, and therefore everybody would be happy that Krishna killed him. Okay, I like this one. It's interesting that Vasudeva, being a Kshatriya, didn't do some amazing martial art move to disarm Kamsa. That would have been cool, huh? I'm sure he could have. Rather, he protected his wife through diplomatic words. What does this tell us about the duties of a husband and Kshatriya to protect? Well, Kshatriyas, this is explained nicely in the story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad, where the teachers are teaching Prahlad about 4 different kinds of diplomacy, and that you only use punishment as a last resort, that you first try different kinds of diplomacy. So in our modern society also, the government leaders should do this. This is something in general, that not to just immediately resort to violence, even if the person you're dealing with is violent. You know, so it's not that, oh, the person I'm dealing with is violent, therefore, I mean, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you have no choice but to go to immediately to violence. But it shouldn't be like that. There should be some sort of negotiation, some sort of diplomacy. I mean, I think one of the big complaints people are having, at least in the United States, about the police force is that they're often too quick to go directly to violence, that they don't try other tactics first. And this was quite a risk Vasudeva was taking, because his diplomacy ended up getting him put in jail. But still, he felt that it was better to be diplomatic than to go immediately to violence. So the Kshatriyas, in one sense, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly kingdom. In one sense, the Kshatriyas like it when there is some opportunity to actually fight. On the other hand, we see even among the Kshatriyas, when they're on the battlefield, they often need to insult each other in order to get each other to fight. So there's some hesitancy, and therefore they start calling each other ill names and criticizing each other, angering each other. And Prabhupada often explains this about Arjuna, that Arjuna was a naturally compassionate person, because to be a Kshatriya, ultimately you have to be a very caring person. It's not that you're a violent person. The main job of government is to care for the citizens, not to go around killing people. Srila Prabhupada left at the age of 69 for America. Can we understand this as setting the scene, like before Krishna appeared? If you want to talk about his life up until that point, yeah, I mean, Satsuma Maharaj called it a lifetime in preparation, that Krishna was setting the scene in India and in the rest of the world. There were forces operating in the world at the time that Srila Prabhupada came that had made things very fertile for planting the seed of bhakti.
We have another question.
Okay.
There are so many universes. Does this mean that Nrsimhadev, Lord Ram, Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya simultaneously appear and disappear from the various planets?
Yes.
Another question is regarding Mother Rohini and why she stayed in Vrindavan and not with Vasudev's family and his other queens.
Well, some of his other queens were in Vrindavan. The Bhagavatam simply says Rohini and other queens. So We don't know if all 15 of the other queens were in Vrindavan, or maybe there were just 3 in Vrindavan and some in other places. The Bhagavatam does talk about how the dynasties, Chitarika Saki, Hare Krishna. The Bhagavatam does talk about how the different members of these different dynasties were spread out in various places out of fear of Kamsa. And it's not stated, but I think it's a pretty safe presumption that Vasudeva and Rohini were very concerned about the safety of Balaram. So, because Kamsa knew that Devaki's 8th child would kill him, he might have been concerned about even Vasudeva's children by his other queens, and so they were kind of keeping it, low profile. I mean, everyone knew that Balaram was Vasudeva's son, but still, they kind of weren't having it right in Kamsa's face. So to kind of keep things away from Kamsa and not make any risk for the children is what I understand. And for the women as well. I mean, they were much more, Kamsa just arrested Vasudeva and Devaki, but he could have arrested the whole family. They were trying to keep things as safe as possible. And it was a very heavy time. Kamsa was a very cruel leader. And most of the pious people some of them apparently became worshippers of Kamsa. Some of them apparently kowtowed to Kamsa, but some of them were even hiding in caves in the mountains. They were deeply concerned that he was in charge.
This question comes from Facebook. Kamsa was killed by Krishna. So what would his destination be? He was a demon, but was lucky to be killed by Krishna himself.
Well, it's interesting because he was killed by Lord Vishnu in his previous life as Kalanimi, but again, he took birth as a demon. In this birth as Kamsa, ever since he got that message from the voice in the sky, he had been thinking simply about the Lord. So sometimes this happens to us, we think someone's our enemy, or feel threatened by something or someone, and we become absorbed in it constantly. I'm sure we've had some fear or anxiety that has just taken over our thoughts for some period of time. So Kamsa was completely absorbed in thoughts of the form of the Lord, and however one is thinking of the Lord, it doesn't matter. If you're thinking of the Lord in fear, if you're thinking of the Lord in anger, if there's any emotion involved, then one becomes purified by that thinking of the Lord with emotion. So he still had so many offenses to the Vaishnavas, that was purified by the Lord's killing him. But that thinking of the form of the Lord with emotion, it brought him to the spiritual world where he took on a form like that of the Lord.
That was all the questions we have received.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity.
We have 10 more minutes. If you have time, if you would like to expand a little about all the arguments that Vasudeva made to Kamsa.
Oh, well, that would be a long time. I think that's a whole other class, right? Instead of that, why don't we just look at this last question, right? And the Brahma Samhita says, Yam Kroda Kama Sahaja Pranayati Bhiti Vatsalya Moha Guru Gorva Savior Bhavai Samchinchitat Sadrisim Time that one who becomes absorbed in the Lord with any emotion. So our bhakti yoga process is a process of becoming absorbed in the Lord with emotion. I was just reading the Bhagavad Gita today, where Krishna is saying whether we follow the path of Sankhya, which is Gyan Yoga mixed with a little Dhyan Yoga, or whether we follow the path of Bhakti, they each lead to the same place. And Prabhupada, in his explanation, says that the path of detachment from material things and the path of attachment to Krishna are the same, that they lead to the same place. So our bhakti yoga process is primarily a process of getting attached to Krishna emotionally. Now, with Kamsa, he was attached to Krishna in fear and anger. We're not advised to get attached to Krishna in fear and anger. But fear and anger is a lot better than just being blasé, just like, well, I don't really care about Krishna. Or just being on some theoretical platform, some philosophical platform. So we might start out just having primarily a philosophical interest in Krishna, especially if we've come to Krishna consciousness out of curiosity. But ultimately, we really want to develop attachment emotionally to Krishna. And the samadhi we're aiming for as bhakti yogis is a samadhi of attachment. And this is something that we can all very, very easily understand. That whenever I have some strong emotion in connection with another living being, or in connection with an activity, or in connection with an object, I become absorbed in that. It doesn't really even matter what it is. I can become absorbed in my phone. If you've ever misplaced your phone, you understand that you can become absorbed, at least for a few minutes, and that all you're thinking about is your phone or something, your keys, or your passport, maybe, something that, even an object, we can, because we have some attachment, we're thinking, without my passport, how will I be able to function? Or without my wallet, or somebody will get my money and my credit card, or someone will get my key, and we have some emotion wrapped up in it. And so even a very ordinary object, a wallet with some cash and credit cards in it, it's a piece of cloth with some pieces of paper and plastic. Normally, if I just gave you a piece of cloth and pieces of paper and pieces of plastic, there wouldn't be any emotion connected to it. But because we're thinking these pieces of paper and pieces of plastic, this is how I live. This is how I'm going to get food. This is how I'm going to get a place. This is how I'm going to get clothing. Our whole survival is wrapped up in this little thing. So, if we've lost our wallet, then it can become a complete absorption. I had a friend who was, when they were traveling, they were going to an airport, and they had a lot of bags, and the husband was carrying his bags and his wife's bags. And because he was carrying both of their bags, he didn't realize that he left one of his bags on the train. And so, it wasn't until after they got on the plane and so forth, they realized they left the bag on the train, and they never recovered it. But they spent months, contacting the train company and the government, and even having somebody in that country go to the lost and found for the train station and look for their bag and so forth. So we can feel that intense emotion just for an object. Now, when it comes to a living being, we can feel that way for an animal. People feel that way toward their pets, whether they're dogs or cats or cows or llamas or whatever they are, hamsters. And we certainly can feel that way for a family member. I have a friend whose adult daughter died from disease. It wasn't an unanticipated death. And the woman is still mourning, like 5 years later. It's her absorption. She's absorbed in mourning for the passing of her child. So we know how to become fully absorbed in an object, even insignificant object, and in another living being when there's some emotion. So we want to take that emotion to Krishna. Ultimately, all these objects and living beings are part of Krishna. And if I can have that much attachment to something that's an infinitesimal part of Krishna, how much attachment could I have for Krishna? When I become fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna with any emotion, then I automatically become detached from this material world. Again, we have this experience even materially. If I'm experiencing a strong enough emotion about something, everything else fades into the background. I forget about everything else. I lose interest in everything else. Where's my wallet? Where's my wallet? What about that? I have to find my wallet. We become fixated, and your dinner's getting cold. I don't care. I've got to find my wallet. Just like that. So why can't we do that with Krishna? And if even the demons can do that with Krishna, even the demons can have such strong feelings that they end up becoming liberated. So what to speak of this? So I think I should end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are looking forward to having more seminars and lectures with you. This was absolutely wonderful. I think I keep saying this, hearing these lectures, it's more relishing than rubbery with rasgullas. Thank you so much. And thank you, dear Sarah Mangala, for being a wonderful host. And thank you, Sharilia, for organizing such a
pleasure. Thank you
wonderful
very much.
Janmashtami program. Dear Vaishnavis, thank you for attending and spending these days with us. Hari Bol. For the ladies with us on Zoom, if you can kindly please switch on your video and unmute yourself, we can all say a warm Hari Bol for Urmila Prabhu.
Haribo.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Happy
Thank you.
Janmashtami.
Haribol, Mataji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Urmila, for your example
Hare
and your
Krishna.
dedication all these years. Truly miraculous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your good wishes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. We